Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion today on why B2B e-commerce needs better product discovery and search. We've got a fantastic session lined up for you where we'll be exploring particular needs of B2B e-commerce, some of the similarities and differences to B2C, and some of the strategies we've learned to help you achieve growth online. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into it. This is a live session, so please submit your questions on the right-hand side in the control panel, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. So to kick off, let's meet our speakers. We've got a wealth of experience with us today from many years in the e-commerce and product discovery space. Should we do a quick round of intros first? Emily, over to you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, Emily Pfeiffer. I'm a principal analyst at Forrester. I cover commerce search, B2C commerce solutions, and order management systems. I've been here 4.5 years, but I've been a practitioner my whole career using and buying these solutions.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name's Ian Gray. I'm head of pre-sales here at FactFinder. I started in e-commerce at the end of the 90s. And I think one of the reasons I'm here today is that over that time, I've had the privilege of working with a wide range of businesses in both B2B and B2C. And I've learned a lot just from listening to them and understanding their issues and help them solve those issues. And I hope to share some of that knowledge with you today.
Great, thanks both. And myself, I'm Lauren Evans. I'm the CMO here at FactFinder. Been working in the marketing and e-commerce tech space for well over 15 years now, again, with B2B and B2Cs. So lots to share. Right, let's get into it. So I wanted to start with this slide, and that's that 65% of B2Bs are now fully transacting online, and this is set to grow to something like 80% by 2027. Of course, on the B2C side, this transition from offline to online has been happening for well over a decade. I know I'm used to sitting on my couch and ordering pretty much anything I need at the click of a button, and things I don't need most of the time. So this expectation has, of course, now made its way over to the B2B world because, of course, business buyers and consumers are the same people. So because of this, there's a lot to learn. If we go to the next slide, there's a lot to learn from the B2C experience in B2B. Emily, I know you've done a lot of research on this recently. What are some of the findings from that research, and what can we learn for B2B?
I have, yeah. It's, we're in a really odd place in search. We're coming off many, many years of lots of businesses, especially in B2C, using the search solution that was embedded within their commerce solution. So for a long time, we kind of relied on what came with commerce. And there have been some standalone solutions that many businesses have added on as well, but there were few. Right? Most were still using what came with commerce. If we go back far enough, like a decade, which, in digital is quite some time. We remember Solar, which was an open source solution, or Elastic, and these other solutions that commerce built on top of. So they were sort of the nuts and bolts toolboxes of search, and they weren't commerce specific, right? So commerce solutions built commerce specific search on the backs of that tech. And it was good enough while it was. It's not good enough anymore. And so we're now in this place where there's been a convergence. We had solutions that talked about search or product recommendations or merchandising, how the products sit next to each other on the digital shelf. Product discovery, right? The process of how customers come upon the things they might want to buy or find the things they know they want to buy more directly. And then personalization of product specifically. We talk about personalization a lot of different ways. I want to be clear when I say it, I mean it as a verb or an adjective, not a noun. Personalization is not a thing that we do, but there are personalized experiences, personalized product recommendations, right? So it's a matter of personalizing experiences in the content that we serve. So all of these things have come together in this kind of great convergence to become a new breed of commerce search and product discovery solutions. It's a really exciting time in the tech, and it's bringing so much more rich experiences to end customers. Specifically in B2C, when we're talking about consumers, we know, for instance, that only 10% are like, yeah, I don't really rely on on search, right? I kind of browse around, I find what I need. Only 10% said that. Everyone else, one way or another, kind of goes straight to the search function to find the products that they intend to buy.
I know I fit into that 90%. Always go straight to the search bar. Sometimes it's for something really specific. Sometimes I haven't got a clue what I want and I just want a bit of inspiration. Do you see that behavior changing, and how does that behavior differ in B2B?
Yeah, it's really important to remember that a consumer behaves a certain way. A B2B buyer is also a consumer. So we'll see more about this as we get into the content today. But the B2B behavior, B2B buying behavior is very strongly influenced at this point by the expectations of consumers because they're the same people, right? B2B and B2C shoppers are both consumers. So absolutely we see this spilling over. We see those expectations carrying through. And, where we used to have a kind of an understanding, I guess, in B2B that well, it's a B2B buying experience. It's going to be clunkier, different, harder to find. That's gone. Yeah, the expectations are really the same. And so similarly, B2B buyers want to get straight to what they need. They are looking to search for it immediately. And you know what, I would even say maybe more so because in B2B, it's often a need, not a want, right? Consumers can shop for fun. B2B buyers are usually shopping out of necessity. So going straight to the product they know they want, more likely.
Yeah, also things like part numbers or SKUs, I guess that influence.
Yeah, just get me what I need. Absolutely. So well over half of US consumers told us that they use the filters on a website to see specific results. It's even a little bit higher in the UK. So this just speaks to the savvy of consumers. This shouldn't be surprising because everyone listening also is a consumer. And you can imagine when you search for something that you're going to use those filters to get more specific, right? To kind of whittle down to what it is you're looking for. And, consumers are telling us, of course, that they do this as well. They're also saying that they expect the websites they shop on to understand the products they're most likely to want based on their history with the brand. And I think this is fascinating. This is something we've been doing in B2C, in B2B, and in selling. We've been doing this for a long time. But these numbers are speaking to the public's understanding, right? They realize that we're doing this. They understand that sellers, B2C, B2B, whatever, have access to their data. And they're expecting us to do a good job, to use it, to deliver better experiences for them.
And maybe just to add in here on, particularly look at history, it's a point that's perhaps even more relevant for B2B when we consider something like share of wallet. Because in B2C, as we perhaps already talked about and touched on, most of us spread our shopping around and we buy from multiple sites, multiple retailers at different times, where B2B buyers tend to use fewer sites. Maybe because I'm a plumber and there's a depot nearby, I can pick up my parts, or maybe I'm buying medical supplies that can get everything from one site. So they tend to use fewer sites. So those sites can and should have a much better understanding of what I buy and should be able to do a much better job of targeting and personalizing.
Totally agree. Yeah, it's like they have more visibility, right, into a larger share of the historical shopping behavior. Absolutely. Yeah, to me, that sounds like opportunity, right? That's an opportunity not to miss. Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
hmm so we're also seeing this in terms of behavior in the current session. So I'm just going to flip back. So here we are looking at historic behavior, right? Yes, I expect a company to know what I want based on what I've done in the past. 43% said I agree. But here we're looking at behavior in the current shopping session, and it only goes down to 40%. So again, this indicates that end consumers, B2B buyers, shoppers in general, are aware that we can see what they're doing and that we can use that data to create better experiences, more relevant experiences for them. This is exciting. It's promising. It's also dangerous. So, I hear vendors saying things that it's very interesting. It's exciting to hear. Um, Search results can update instantly based on customer behavior in real time. Right. So this sounds amazing that we don't have to wait until the next shopping session. We don't have to wait until they've placed an order to come back and understand what to show them next time. But based on the immediate click, we can change what they see. So sounds good, but I'm imagining shopping in a physical store. right? And let's say that I'm shopping for my, I'm American, so I want to say potato chips, but for our international audience, my crisps, right? And and I love just like a nice plain Lay's
Mhm.
potato chip. Okay. I pick one up, I put it in my cart, and when I turn and look back at the aisle, suddenly the entire aisle is nothing but Lay's potato chips. Okay. This is overwhelming. It's confusing. It's disorienting, and it's not an expected behavior. So expectations management is very important. We'd like to talk about surprise and delight, and I'm not sure why. Like, who actually wants to surprise their customers? I think expectations management doesn't sound as cool, but much smarter than surprise and delight. Okay, so this puts me off a little bit, and I'm not alone. Only 21% of US consumers said, yes, I would like online retailers to adjust the search results instantly. And when we dig in on that data, the vast majority are millennial shoppers, not older, not younger. There's something about the millennial generation that really wants that kind of instant response. But this is a perfect moment to say, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And while we need to leverage the data, create better and more relevant experiences, we should not do it at the expense of a comfortable experience for our shoppers.
Thanks, Emily. That was really, really insightful. So there's clearly some really important similarities that we need to take into consideration when we're creating these e-commerce strategies for B2B and B2C. So there are also some really important differences, though. And the first one is around personalization. We've sort of touched on it already, but B2C is, of course, so much more focused on personal preference. And then on the B2B side, it's much more about that company level need. To give that a little bit of context, if you're a consumer and you're searching on a website for a red top, the system's going to infer that you've got a preference for red because that's what you've been looking for. And then it may re-rank your results based on that color preference. Whereas on the B2B side, color really has no relevance at all. When you're looking for something to buy, it's much more important to have things like personalized product assortments or personalized pricing. So it's a very different type of personalization when it comes to that. Other things to think about is upsell. So when you're on the B2B side, it needs to be much more considered. It's not your own money that you're spending. So definitely need to think about that when you're spending it. Whereas on the B2C side, it's much more impulsive. So again, this really shapes those type of personalized recommendations that you show to the shopper because they're going to be in a different mindset. And then lastly, data. When you're looking at personalization data on the B2B side, it's much more about that first party data. You've got all that rich login data that you get with companies having an account. And like you said, Ian, them going back to probably the same business time and time again. Whereas on the B2C side, it's much more about third party data and cookie data. So there's a lot that flows into that. And Emily, we'll get to, I know you've got a point to discuss about zero party data, and we'll get to that shortly. But first, there's a couple of strategies that you can really take advantage of these, I guess, nuances in personalization. Ian, can you go through a couple of those first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, great. Thank you, Lauren. So B2B differs from B2C, as we've said, in a couple of ways. One of the big ways is that in the B2B, those businesses typically do not sell all of their products to all of their customers for the same price. And that's just a fundamental difference. So in the offline world, these B2B businesses, they have account managers who will go out and deal with each of their customers and come up with bespoke pricing and bespoke assortments, and it's all managed by a person. But transferring that model online, while it's critically important, is really problematic if it's not managed properly and it's not done well. And it's a problem that someone like Office Depot had, they suffered with, just having this numerous customers with specific product assortments, and how do they manage that when we move online? And there's obviously good ways of doing that and bad ways of doing that. But really what we have to be able to do here is apply some kind of filtering mechanism so that each customer, when they come into the site, only sees their own products, their own assortment at their own prices. You don't want to show customers the wrong assortment. You don't want to show them the wrong prices, because that could be really problematic. But this needs to be done in a way that's scaled and that is performant, and that customers want to use and don't really notice is there. And so we have a kind of a technology solution to this that allows us to do it, similar to the way a database view might work if people are familiar to that. But it essentially just allows us to demonstrate this capability and just show the right products to the right customers at the right price when they visit the site, and that's critical. And that is not personalization. Some people might say it is, some people might say it isn't, but it is, because it's giving somebody a personal view of what they need to see. I think one of the other things that we're going to just talk about a bit is recommendations. And again, I think it's a key strategy for business to business customers to adopt. Just personalizing recommendations. Because if I have a technical buyer with a very specific requirement for a certain bearing or for a certain part that has to be tolerant, it has to work in a particular temperature environment, then if I'm going to make recommendations or suggestions or alternatives, these have got to be super smart, arguably a lot more so than B2C, because all of the capabilities of my recommendation or my alternative need to match all of the tolerances and capabilities of the product being viewed. And Mayflex is a great example of this. They are a leading distributor of IP solutions, including infrastructure, networking, electronic security, and they have 3 levels of tailored recommendations when you view a product. The first level are for products that are complementary. The second level shows alternatives. And the third level is products that are compatible with the item being viewed, which is an important kind of third element here. So if we take an example of an infrared security camera, the first level might show patch panels or cables. The second level of recommendations may be other cameras that you might want to consider that may have slightly more capabilities or maybe be at a slightly different price point. But that third level will show specific items that are compatible with that camera. So, for example, mounts, specific mounts for the camera, or other kinds of specific alternative or complementary products which will work with it. And of course, these recommendations can be done manually. You can sit a person down with each of these products and make all of these product relationships, but that really doesn't scale. And so far better is to automate this. But of course, for automation, we need some kind of customer data, or we need some kind of sales data. And that probably feeds into one of the big discussions around data.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. So we touched on zero party. I have a lot to say about this. This is a terribly important concept to understand, especially in B2B, in my experience. So zero party data is self-reported. It's the stuff that users knowingly and willingly share. This is different. We'll talk more in a little bit about other types of data around the customer that we can understand for various reasons. But zero party is something they know they're telling us. Okay. So in B2C, it might mean that they fill out a survey, right? I'll fill out a survey on a beauty website to directly communicate my skin tone, my skincare concerns, my age, right? So that the website can recommend the right moisturizer for my skin. I know that I've provided that data. I did it willingly and knowingly. And I absolutely expect that website's going to do a good job of serving recommendations to me based on the information I provided to them. There's nothing more important than delivering on that, right? So remember my little pie charts, the expectation. Customers know they're providing it. They absolutely expect you to do something useful for them with that data. Now in B2B, we have the chance to personalize around different preferences and needs, some of the things that Ian was just talking about, right? So the stage in the buyer journey. Are they just discovering our brand? Are they ready to buy? Do they know us well? And we're just not going to waste their time and bring them straight to what we know they need. The role in the buying decision. Maybe they're not the decision maker. It's best if we know that in B2B in particular. A B2C shopper is probably just buying. They probably have the authority to buy. Not necessarily so in B2B. There might also be only certain products they're allowed to buy. So it might be their entitlements, the brands that they're pre-approved to purchase, or even specific items approved for sale in their region, right? I have gamed systems to buy products that are not supposed to be for sale in Massachusetts where I live by figuring out whose supply chain is managing permissions better and who's not, because I want the product. So understanding where we're allowed to purchase things, very important as well. And we need to know about fitment or compatibility. Ian, you just touched on this a minute ago, right? If we're selling car parts to dealerships, you can't send a Honda part to a Toyota dealership. So understanding the compatibility, it's not just brand, it's literally what works together. And sometimes it's as personal as a specific product range that we've defined for a customer. So again, it might come from them. These are the things that work for me. It's compatibility, it's whatever, but it also might come from the business to say, I'm only going to sell certain products into this chain of stores because I want to protect some for my brand and other places.
This is a really interesting concept, actually. And I think if we look at large language models and their need for self-reported data, whether that's through conversational search, VARs, or chatbots, I think this is only going to get more important. So be interesting to see how this develops as that moves forward. Right. So moving on to the next core difference we've identified is buying behavior. So in this context, we've already sort of touched on that B2B is a lot more considered and B2C is much more impulsive. But in this context of looking at behavior, there's a few more angles we just wanted to explore here. So when you look at the purchasing behavior, B2B is much higher value and also tends to be bulk orders. One of our customers, Kastner, they sell catering supplies to retailers and restaurants. One of their buyers orders hundreds and hundreds of ingredients in one go. So if you compare that to the handful of products that B2C customers makes, it really demands a different type of approach when it comes to the e-commerce platform supporting that. Also, looking at loyalty tends to be more prevalent in B2B because one, there's more replenishment orders, and two, there's also more of a chance that customer has a contract and they've got a contract for 12 months, which starts at the start of the year, which is always great. But how do you encourage loyalty more in B2B? And there are some key strategies that we've got to do that. As I mentioned, Kastner is a great example here. Ian, do you want to talk through how Kastner do it?
Yeah, sure, of course. Thanks, Lauren. So, many businesses follow a similar pattern. They buy things, they use them to add some value, and they sell them on, or they sell something new. Now, those items they buy may be raw materials. They may be ingredients for recipes. They may be service kits for machines. But whatever it is, there's some kind of use rate or consumption rate. And this is fundamental for most businesses. And so what we're able to look at is understand how often regularly these items are consumed. And so before a customer runs out of a product, or before they're able to buy that product somewhere else, there's an opportunity to remind them to reorder. And for those items, we want to be able to make them easy to reorder. We don't want those shoppers to have to go searching for them. We want to be able to prompt them, kind of drop them onto their screen, allow them to just press a button and very easily reorder to make sure that nothing's forgotten. And there's some smart AI, of course, underpinning all of this. But the solution adapts to the individual customer behavior. So this isn't just a one size fits all. It's not, if we look at Kastner, all their customers buy, eggs every week. It's not that at all. It analyzes the previous kind of customer data, the orders, how often they buy things, when they buy them, how often they use them. And it makes that suggestion back to these customers before they run out. Now, this is great for Kastner because it increases their basket each time. But really, it's important for their customers as well, because it means that their customers don't run out of products. So, if you're trying to run a restaurant and you run out of flour or you run out of eggs in the middle of a shift, all of a sudden, that's a real inconvenience. And you have to send someone out to a local store and go and try and buy them. So this is a real win-win.
I love that example. That it just hammers home, I think, the necessity in B2B, doesn't it? Yeah, it's not a nice to have.
Exactly to the point you made earlier. People don't buy these things because they'd like to have them. They buy them because their business doesn't function without them.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So speaking of that B2B buyer behavior, right? We know that, yes, the buyer is just a consumer. They shop for themselves. They bring all of those expectations that they have as a consumer to every buying experience. And just the idea of those expectations, it's usually about literally the experience, the quality of the experience, right? So you as a shopper, you're using apps, you're using social media, you're having all of the different digital experiences that you have. You're not isolating those experiences. If you have a terrible experience filling out a form or registering for something, you're not only comparing it to like the other forms you filled out for your doctor, right? You're comparing it to all of the other times you filled out a form and it was fun and easy. We all do that. We compare those experiences, and a B2B buyer is no different. But the buyer now really does have different sets of expectations that we have to understand. So we know that the B2B buyer wants to conduct research independently. This too is similar in B2C. They're moving away from, in some areas, the representative-led kind of selling experiences that a lot of businesses are used to. They're saying, I want to do my own research. I want to figure out what I need to buy. And so in B2C, we have data that says, I don't really believe that a store associate knows as much as I do about the product I want to buy. It's similar in B2B. These buyers are doing their own research. They want to make sure that they understand, right? They want to be informed themselves. They don't want to be sold to as much anymore. They want to learn and they want to feel heard. So they're looking for an experience that feels to them frictionless. This is a questionable word. I'm sorry. We use it all the time. Nothing's frictionless. What we really mean is don't put bumps in the road on the way to your customer buying your product. Nothing's frictionless, but let's sand it down, right? Let's make it as easy as we can for them to move through that process. So gone are the days of clunky B2B experiences and the assumption that the buyer will just kind of put up with it because it's just B2B. That's done. They want help meeting their business objectives, right? They are focused on what they need to achieve. And they're not really willing to just kind of go along for the ride otherwise. And maybe most importantly, they want to buy where and how they prefer. So this is a place where we definitely see it kind of dovetailing more with those B2C kind of consumer expectations. B2B buyers might want to shop online. They might even want to just sort of sign up for automatic replenishment or subscription and not have to order manually again for common items. So Ian, in the story you were just telling, right, the upsell, the recommendation, it seems like you might be out of this. More and more we're hearing B2B buyers say, I don't even want to have to think about it. You know how often I've needed this in this quantity. Can you just send it to me as I need it, right? And that's a very consumer mentality. And it's absolutely spilling over into the B2B buyer's experience.
Thanks. Now, moving on to the last difference is data and complexity. And we've very much talked on this just as you were talking through your example, Emily, but it is more complex in B2B. There's so much more to think about. There's multiple decision makers, and also product catalogs tend to be a lot more complex. Our customer PBS, they sell office supplies to B2B and B2C. And they were telling me the other day, they have hundreds of different envelopes, and envelopes is just one of 1,000 different products they have. So it starts to really highlight the sort of web of product catalogs that B2Bs have. And so because of this, there tends to be a heavier reliance on advisors. Traditionally, this was offline advisors, this was on the phone, but of course, now that can be supported digitally. And we've got a great example of that with one of our customers. And so I'll hand it over to you, Ian, to talk through that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So we've identified already that the B2B buyers can be very technically knowledgeable about what they need. That's not necessarily to say that they're very knowledgeable about the seller's product range. So I know I need something that has certain characteristics, but what I then need help with is identifying which of your products meets those criteria and meets those characteristics and solves my problem. And in the offline world, I'd probably call somebody at my supplier and say, this is what I'm looking for. have a conversation with somebody technical, and then understand which of the products fits my need. But, increasingly, these advisors are moving online. Now, at one end of this spectrum, you can add an awful lot of value into the selling process without being overly complex here. By asking a few simple questions about what the shopper's looking for, you can guide them towards a set of products, and you can add, huge amounts of value and really help them identify where in your product catalog they can find what they're looking for. So it doesn't need to be massively complex. But this is certainly something that Denios has identified as giving real value to them and to their customers just by having those interactions, asking a few questions, guiding the customer, rather than just saying, here's a product catalog, figure it out for yourself, which really isn't that helpful. Now, of course, as AI and these large language models are, becoming more and more common, they will play a much more significant role in these kind of advisors moving forward, as we're starting to have more conversational type searches. And although we may not like the experience we get today with a chat capability and a customer service, in the not too distant future, some are already there, having a chat bot that's really backed up by a powerful large language model and a really kind of good AI model can be very, very powerful in just getting customers the answers they want very, very quickly and very easily. But of course, it needs the data in terms of, the product modeling and understanding products, but also just that large language capability to be able to just interact with a human being.
I love that point that it's all well and good for them to know what they're shopping for, right? But we understand the product better than they do. How do we get the right product to them? So we've been talking about different types of data, and this is all just for the record. Right now, we're kind of honed in on customer data, understanding who they are and what they want really specifically, maybe even mostly just who they are. And so at Forrester, we're just really a bunch of nerds, and we think a lot about data and sources and how we get it. And so, we think about the right data, where it comes from, and how we can acquire it. So personalization in this product discovery process, it's all about what we show based on what we know, right? So we can think about this in terms of the types of data that we collect, the ways we collect it. Inferred data is kind of the stuff that we guess based on what we know. Observed data is what we can see as it happens. And that self-reported data comes from the customers, but not always consciously. Right. So third-party data is usually coming in from another source. I love the LinkedIn profile here as an example. Yes, it's self-reported. A customer's filling out their profile. They're presenting to the world the information on LinkedIn, but they don't know they're presenting it to you. It's coming in through that third-party channel, LinkedIn, right? It's not at all direct. Second party gets closer to the customer. We move through the details like cookies or information they provided to other parties. First party is provided by the customer themselves, but it's sort of less conscious and less intentional than zero-party data. So we discussed this earlier. Zero-party data has huge implications in B2B. This is where we really understand the customer and where they want us to know them. They've chosen to tell us what they want us to know and understand about them. So consumers, B2B buyers, they're all the same in this sense. They're often willing to offer up their data, but they must feel that it's used to create a better experience for them. That's crucial. And we know this directly from them. We have this data that says, I'm willing to open up. I'm willing to provide this information if I believe and I see that it's used to create a better, more relevant experience for me. Crucial. The worst thing you can do is ask, collect, and not deliver. Okay, so if your buyers let you know what types of parts they can buy, whether they're the decision owner, the brands they prefer, you'd better suggest great fit products for them, right? As Ian, as you just said, you're the one who knows your products. So you have to interpret it and understand, therefore, what to deliver to them. It's everything. So there's something else I want to make sure. Oh, please, of course.
You said something then, what we show based on what we know. That's great. Have you got that trademarked, or can we all use that?
Of course. Yes, I'm sure that's Forrester IP right there. Yeah. Definitely. That was awesome. Right. Okay. So I want to make sure that we talk about the fact that in B2B search, there's something else we need to be very careful of, and that is the necessity of precise query matching. So in B2B, it's perfectly fine to suggest products with similar terms to the search query, right? So if I search for a green boot, I'm looking for a green boot, you can pluralize it and show me green boots, right? That's fine. Add the S, it's still the same word. It has the same meaning in terms of what I'm looking for. If I search for a Yeti mug and I misspell it Yetti, you can understand that I just don't know the brand very well somehow. And I really wanted Yeti products Yetti. Fine. In B2B, if I search for a part number, I definitely do not want similar items. And a part number can be a whole string of many, many characters, and one tiny change can be the difference between a part that fixes my problem and one that absolutely does not. It won't work for my needs, and that can be disastrous. And when they search, a customer isn't necessarily making sure that their results precisely match every character they searched for. They're relying on you, right? So we absolutely need to make sure that we understand the intent of that query in that moment, and that we can say, okay, yeah, I understand you're looking for precisely this thing, not similar things, and just serve that, even if it means the search results have one item or none. It's better to say we just don't have that thing than to suggest similar in that case. That's an understanding of intent of the customer in the moment.
Just thinking about that as well, how important that would be in like a pharmaceutical environment. If you're looking for a particular drug and then maybe there's like recommended drugs, but those drugs interact in some sort of weird way.
Right.
That's a
No,
no-go.
please don't give me something similar. Yeah.
The important preciseness, exactly.
Great point. Yes. Yep. Precision. Right. So here's a view of search results on an imaginary B2B website. And I just wanted to give this kind of familiar view to think about the types of data that are pulling together a stellar experience here. Right. So we have the search query, of course. Don't forget that that in itself is a source of data that the customer provides. They're literally telling you what they want and the words that they have. Right. Then you can see how, based on the query, the system displays relevant facets. We can see that the two categories over on the side. We're narrowing it down based on the product data that it's pulling back and the understanding of into which categories the relevant products in these results have been merchandised, right? So these products sit in a finite number of categories. We're not seeing all of them. We're seeing the relevant ones, the big tools, the small tools, right? So they're only showing based on the results as relevant. But as a customer, now the shopper has purchased products from this, I don't know, primitive tool company before. So maybe they're prioritizing more products from the same brand here, right? They even have the option to check a box. Do you see that little checkbox? To show only items they've previously ordered. So that's a shortcut to reordering, which again is another kind of critical tool in B2B selling. They often want to buy the same thing they've bought before. Can't remember the name of it. I know it was something like this. Yeah, only show me my previous purchases. Right. And finally, we're seeing other products prominently in this list, but based on what the customer has done in the current session. So maybe they've clicked a few times on that kind of, I don't know, spear type tools, right? So those are being suggested higher in the ranking. They're being boosted higher. This is also sometimes called affinity scoring. We're sort of understanding based on their intent what they want. Please notice that all of the search results are not plastered with spears. They're just boosted higher in the ranking because we believe there's more interest there, but we haven't completely rearranged everything around a couple of clicks. So we can understand what they want. And when you think about it, we have a mountain of ways to let the customer tell us what they're looking for directly and indirectly. And then we need to do a good job, a very good job of using what they've given to us to improve their experience.
So now drawing back to the title of the topic of the webinar, why product discovery is so important for B2B, we've really examined, why technology supports both the similarities and differences. I know you did a lot of research when you launched the first wave last year on product discovery. Can you tell us a little bit more, Emily, about why you decided it needed its own category and some of the interesting findings?
Yeah, absolutely. This is it's a big deal at Forrester. The Forrester Wave is an evaluation of software in a certain category. And once we introduce a new Forrester Wave, it's a promise to repeat it, right? We're taking on that work, and it's a lot of work for Forrester and for the participating vendors, as you know. So the moment came about a year ago, a little over a year ago, when I was watching that convergence that I talked about earlier, my sort of pretty flower looking Venn diagram, right? Where I saw these things coming together. And what's interesting to me is that prior to that convergence, there were a handful, 3, maybe 4 primary commerce search vendors. And there's other types of search, but we're talking about kind of commerce focused here. And over the past handful of years, through mostly acquisitions, almost entirely a combination of acquisitions, that list grew to, I think, 28 vendors that I had in the landscape report. A landscape is a prerequisite to a wave, and it lists more vendors than the wave does, which really narrows down to the strongest in the category. So from just a handful to 28, and from there down to just 10 that were invited to the wave. So you can kind of see that the market blew up. And Forrester has defined the market as commerce search and product discovery because it's just not as simple as it used to be. It's not just about search. Everything that we've been talking about today, all of us, is product discovery. It's the process of getting the right product in front of the customer based on what they want. And it should insinuate personalization, right? I agree that showing customers what they want, what they can buy, what's appropriate for them, it's all personalization. And it's terribly important. So seeing this landscape literally of 28 vendors, and getting permission from a lot of people, I was able to move forward with this new coverage area and to really kind of dig in on this category. In the landscape report, where we kind of introduce this new tech category, right, as it exists today, in its kind of new form, it was interesting to find that it's an established market. So we do some analysis to figure out, when we write a landscape, is it emerging, very, very new, established, or mature? And commerce search and product discovery is established, which is interesting because as the first landscape, it wouldn't be uncommon to find it emerging. But we're not talking about completely new vendors. We're talking about convergence, acquisitions, and a lot of growth. Some of that growth right now is coming from AI, large language models, Gen AI, and just kind of the technology itself is like leaping ahead. And often in an established market, that's where you start to see the acquisitions. So we're already there. And I believe it's because we're mostly, almost entirely across this market, we're seeing established, mature vendors who have just kind of created the new market, right? So search isn't new, but this market itself really is. And as I looked at the market, we identify trends, challenges, and disruptors in this specific category of tech. And so the major trend that we found in commerce search is how personalization got pulled in to create a more holistic, targeted experience. This is literally what we've been talking about today. It's not enough to show my best sellers, the products that convert the best, right? It's just that's done, and we can never really be there again. We need to show the products that are most relevant, and we can adjust what relevance means to us, right? We've talked a lot about personalization, but we shouldn't forget optimization. Some businesses might choose to boost the products that are the most profitable to them, or that are overstocked near where the customer is physically shopping, right? So there's optimization for the business as well. But again, we're not just cramming all the most profitable stuff at the front. We're boosting, we're peppering, creating experiences that still feel very relevant while making sure the business needs are kind of worked into the experience as well. It's a challenging market in a lot of ways right now, but the primary challenge in this tech is really understanding the value and benefits of the tech itself, especially where AI is involved. And what I mean here is, it's blown up, right? We're sick of hearing about it. But AI, not Gen AI, AI in search is not new. It's been here a long time. And so the key is in understanding the value, the benefit, the results. Most of my clients, my brands and retailers and manufacturers who I talk to, they are not set it and forget it people, right? They don't want kind of the black box experience. They want to make sure that they have some visibility into the results, some testing to understand the implications and the value that the tech is bringing to them. But it's challenging just across the board. It's really challenging to truly understand how those results are playing out as you experiment and make changes. And new AI models are absolutely disrupting how consumers and shoppers of all sorts are using these solutions, sort of how they're experiencing them and how digital businesses are leveraging the tech. I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see things maybe settle out a little bit, but for now, it's really disruptive and it's a little bit chaotic, which is, it's fun.
Yeah, just on that point, we're seeing the same thing with that automation and control. That balance is definitely what's required by the market at the moment. Having all the great benefits of AI, but then that the ability to add your own skill, your own knowledge, and yeah, the best of both worlds. So we'll see how that changes in the future.
Absolutely.
So that is the end of our content for this session. But now we have a little bit of time for a Q&A. Let me just get the questions up. We've got quite a few here, so we'll try and get through a couple of them. And then if we don't answer your question, we will send an email to you. Right, so first question here. Do you think the mobile experience is also important for B2B? Great question. Ian, do you want to answer that one?
Yes, thanks, Lauren. And yeah, great question. I mean, so far we haven't really talked about kind of touch points or kind of where this information gets surfaced, but many of us perhaps were thinking about websites. Yes, mobile is important, of course. So mobile is always good for asking a question of things like, where's my order? And if, I've ordered something that I want to wear for going out or that I need for a little project I've got at home, I want to know where it is. But some of those things are even more important if I am on site trying to complete a project and I'm waiting for a tool or I'm waiting for a part. And if it's not here today, I've got to come back tomorrow and finish it off. And so, certainly for things like understanding where my order is and can I get here or can I collect it? Mobile's critically important. For the things we've been talking about today around product discovery, again, think of that person on site. They're not in the office. They don't have access to a laptop. They've got their mobile phone. That's all they've got. And they need to order the parts that they might need to finish a job or for tomorrow. You go out, you do a quote for a customer, you need some parts, you need to order it. And they need to be able to find what they want on that mobile device because that may be all they've got. So we have to make it easy for them using all of these different techniques we've talked about, but it has to work on a mobile device. Perhaps one other use case that may be slightly different is kind of almost the other end of that spectrum. Imagine, I'm in HR, I've got some people joining, some new starters. All I want to be able to do, which I can very easily do on a mobile, is kind of go in and say, it's this person, and I want 3 lots of everything they need, right? The laptop, the screen, the desk, the chair. It's all packaged up. I just need 3 of that kind of collection of products and go. A couple of clicks and I can place that order. So I can do that on the train on the way home or wherever I am. So there's a convenience around mobile phones in that we always have them with us. And it is critical for B2B. Maybe some of the drivers are slightly different than they would be in B2C.
Thanks for that, Ian. Okay, so next question we've got. This is a great one for you, Emily. What does commerce search of the future look like?
Okay, so no guarantees, right? But what it looks like from here, I think, is more automation. I hope we're leveraging AI in even more powerful ways and more direct ways with the customer. We're not there yet, right? So I hope we get to that point, but with better testing and validation, right? We should be able to become less reliant on the data entered by humans, like product data, for instance, which is notoriously limited and kind of not pretty. So especially in B2B, it's true in B2C too, though. We wind up with product data that's just maybe not intended to be customer facing. initially, and it's difficult to understand sometimes how to translate it for that purpose, or just to have the staff to do it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in generative AI for content, but also just in AI for automation, as long as, again, we're really focusing on testing, validation, and making sure that the things we're doing are the right things. Yeah, I think that's the way we'll go. We'll see a little bit more hands off, but with more visibility.
Yeah, it's such a fast changing space, isn't it? Especially with Gen AI. It's interesting to think, will we even need websites in the future? Or will we just asking ChatGPT to find our product for us? I hope not. I think that would be a very extreme view, just asking Alexa or, find me this, find me that. So I like doing my own research though. I don't know about you.
And so do B2B buyers.
Yeah, I can't see that happening anytime soon. Hopefully not. Okay, last question. Okay, so what about search results that you refine similar to how you work with ChatGPT? I.e., you do one search and based on the results, you refine your search and more in order to find the products that you're looking for. So, Ian, I think this sort of relates to what you were talking to earlier about guided selling. Could you maybe, just for the purpose of answering this question, just give a brief overview of how that works again?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for the question. So I think it is related partly perhaps to that guided selling, where we're starting to ask the customer for a bit more information, and based on their response, we start to refine down the products that we show them, kind of guide them towards the right products for them. The other aspect I just want to mention is, there's a typical kind of web front end or mobile front end where a person kind of interacts by clicking, I don't know, little checkboxes in order to change what they see on the screen. But essentially, what's happening in search needs to be headless, needs to be disconnected from or agnostic to that front end. And so whether it's via a customer kind of clicking buttons or clicking color choices, or whether it's via a customer kind of using more conversational typing language, or whether it's a customer actually speaking, if we have those APIs, we can disconnect that kind of presentation or that interaction side with what's happening behind the scenes. And I think that's key to just being able to offer that consistency across all of these different touch points, is just having that headless capability and those APIs that deliver all of this capability.
You're really working that zero-party data in that example too, aren't you? Right? Pulling it in, using it. Yeah.
Right. Well, thanks everyone. That is all we have time for today. I hope everyone's enjoyed the session. If we haven't got to your questions, like I said, we will email you and get in touch and answer those. But thank you to Ian, to Emily, and yes, wishing everyone a good rest of their day.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.